Elevator Game is a supernatural horror film that will be premiering on the Shudder streaming service on September 15th, and I got an early screener to check it out and let you guys know if it is worth your time. So, what did I think about this supernatural horror film? Well, stick around and let's talk about it. Elevator Game is a ritual conducted in an elevator in which players attempt to travel to another dimension using a set of rules that can be found online. The film stars Megan Bess, Adam Hurtig, Verity Marks, Alec Carlos, and Madison Macisaac, and many others, and was directed by Rebekah McKendry, and she's done films like All the Creatures Were Stirring and also Glorious. As I do with every Shudder film, I never know really anything about these films, but with this film specifically, I did know the director, Rebekah McKendry. I've seen 2 of her films, All the Creatures Were Stirring, which I really didn't like that much, and also last year she released Glorious, which I really did like that film, did a really good job of doing a film that was in one centralized location, so I was hopeful for this film, saw the poster. Elevator Game seemed like a pretty cool name for a movie. This movie, it starts out with a girl who is riding in an elevator and she has to press all these different buttons and go to all these different floors. According to the game, you go to all these different floors, and when you get to the 5th floor, you're supposed to meet the 5th floor woman, and it's this urban legend of going into this darker world, and from that point on, you really just don't know what happens, and that's kind of the big mystery of this whole Elevator Game. Positives that I can say about Elevator Game. Now, my biggest thing that I can say that I really liked about this film is overall, I like the idea of going into a darker world and really exploring in a different world outside the human world. This being the red world, I was really hoping that we could get really deep into this world. And I think at times in this film, we really do get to explore that world. With that world, I think it could have been a little bit more into that world because there is some pretty good visuals when we get into that world, but I definitely think that that world is held back in this film. This film, it starts off with this girl riding the elevator, and after she is killed, we then cut to this group that is running this college series where they debunk all these urban legends. And we meet Ryan, and we find out that Ryan has a mission here joining this group, and we go to this elevator in this building, and they are trying to play this game, and they're just playing it off as just a silly old game, and they don't take it seriously. Now, before we even get to that part, there is times where we waste a little bit too much time getting to the elevator. It's about 30 minutes or so till we get to that elevator, and as far as anything really happening, as far as like scary beyond the opening scene, is about 50 minutes into the film. So I think here the pacing of this film, it's a little bit slower than I think it should have been. I think the characters, some of them don't have a whole lot to do. 2 characters that really stood out to me was Ryan. Obviously, he has a backstory as to why he's actually approaching these recent high school graduates who's doing these debunking these series and all that kind of stuff. He has an actual reason why he's doing that. And then we also have Chloe, who is another main character, and I thought she did a really good job. I think she was probably the best out of all the group. We also have one character named Chris, who is a complete jerk, and we find out what he actually does with this other girl that is coming to fruition, and we see the secrets that he really has with that girl, and then obviously the connection with her and Ryan as well. So I did like that aspect about the film, but I felt like the pacing in this film, I felt like we get a little bit of dash of horror here and there, but I felt like we did talk a lot about this red world, and we do get a few scenes where we get to enter into the red world, but I think there is a little bit too much wasted time of talking about the red world and not enough action with going into the red world and really exploring how bad that red world could actually be. The story here is very simple, and the fact that it is very simple, there's not a lot really to really build up that story because it is very simplistic in the way that it's being told. Even though it's simplistic and there isn't a ton to it, I do think that because of that, it definitely hurts some of the runtime here. For instance, there is a backstory with this fifth floor woman, which I can definitely give props for. I like that we have some kind of backstory as to why she's known as the fifth floor woman, why she got to this dark world. But beyond that, it tries to go in the direction of other characters trying to enter this dark world other than our main character, Ryan. It's way too late before we actually get to that point. And there was about 10 minutes left in the film, and I turned to my wife. She wasn't watching the film, but we were sitting there laying down and just watching this movie, and she wasn't paying attention or anything. But I obviously was. And I said to her, I said, this is probably going to have a really bad ending, because it's one of those things where it's trying to build a certain world, and there's a lot of waiting in this film. I feel like a lot of the dialogue with the main characters, some of it is a little bit meandering, and because of that, I think that the runtime and the pacing, it suffers a little bit. I honestly was very surprised of the pacing issues in this film, because Rebekah McKendry just came off of doing Glorious last year, and she did that all in one centralized location, and I thought that she made the dialogue very well done, very witty, funny, humorous, dark at times. Now, obviously, this is a different film. The characters, we get to learn a little bit about each one. I think that they do a little bit too much dialogue, talky kind of dialogue between the characters, and I feel like that takes away from the darkness of this film. I feel like this film could have been a lot darker, like an Insidious, going into the dark world, exploring the different demons that could be in that world, and there really isn't much. It's just kind of this red world where people go into this dark world. You have a little bit of creepiness here and there, but I just don't think it's enough to really carry the film for a full 90 minutes. So I would say at points in this film, I really wanted it to have a little bit more oomph with it. I felt like it definitely lacked carrying a 90-minute runtime, and I think the characters didn't really make it all that interesting at all times. So I think it's just kind of an okay film for me. It definitely is a step down from Glorious, and it's just unfortunate because I feel like this film had a lot of potential. I felt like it could have done a lot more, and I think also because of the budget, I think that really holds it back a little bit. Because of that, the story, it can feel a little bit flat at points, and I feel like the last third act was rushed a little bit. The kills, I would say, are very quick and swift, and there was one kill that I actually really did enjoy because I completely hated the character, and that character really deserved what they got all along. So I definitely was happy with how they actually did make the kills kind of come together within the film. But I think overall for me, this is a film that does have a lot of potential, like I said. I think the elevator setting definitely elevates the film quite a bit because people can be scared of elevators, and then having the flashing lights, going to different floors, definitely going to different floors and seeing like darkness and not knowing what the heck is going to happen. And then the fact that when you're on this elevator, you're not supposed to be looking behind you because then this supernatural person will come out and kill you. So that is really terrifying thinking about that. Obviously adding the fact of an elevator dropping out or something happening within the elevator, it makes it very terrifying with that closing kind of space, and the fact that you're on this elevator and you really just don't know what is going to happen. So I think the game itself is a fun little game, and I like that it has that little legend with it. So I think that's really good about it. But I think overall this film, it could have been done a little bit better. So as far as the score for this film, I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5. It's an alright film. I didn't really think it was a boring film or anything. I just think that it had the potential to be a better film. So as far as should you watch this film, I would say it's worth a watch. I think that there are some elements in here where people can really enjoy, and I think it's a lot better than a film like Bad Things or Perpetrator that I've watched recently on Shudder. And it's a simple film that doesn't require a lot of thinking, and I think overall some of the characters you can maybe latch on to as well. But that's my thoughts for Elevator Game. Let me know in the comments, what did you think about the film? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you just think it was kind of meh? Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys my next review.